Well, good morning, Anagenesis. Daniel Napier here with our third meditation on the nature of wisdom and life according to her in the book of Proverbs. Today we'll be focused on verses 20 through the end of the chapter in Proverbs 1. So if you have your Bibles, turn there. You'll remember that in our last session, we looked at the nature of wisdom and folly, and we saw that on the one hand, folly has to do with a kind of shallowness or short-sightedness in the goals and the means that we approach for life, and it results in an unskilled, clumsy life approach that produces ruin for ourselves and for others. And in contrast to that, we saw that wisdom has to do with living according to this deep structure that God established as he did when he made this world, before he made this world, and that we can come to live by looking at the deep order of how God established things in the world out there as well as for our own lives. And if we live in keeping with that deep order, that produces fruitfulness, and it produces well-being for ourselves and for those around us. And so what I want us to do today, following the text of Proverbs, beginning in verse 20, is simply to listen to the invitation that wisdom makes to each of us. God has put this world together in such a way that the deep order by which he structured it and by which he made it fruitful calls out. It literally invites you and me to pay attention to it, and as we pay attention to it, to alter our lives so that we can kind of live in grain with the reality that God made. And so wisdom invites. Let's hear her, and we'll listen first to her invitation, and then we'll listen to the conditions of that invitation, because they're important for understanding the nature of wisdom and her acquisition in human life. So chapter 1, verse 20. Wisdom shouts in the street. She lifts her voice in the city square. At the heads of the noisy streets, she cries out, and at the entrance of the gates in the city, she utters her sayings. How long, O simple ones, will you love naivete? And scoffers delight themselves in scoffing, and fools hate knowledge. Turn instead to my reproof, my correction. Behold, I will pour out my spirit on you. I will make my words known to you. Part of what we see here is that wisdom's invitation comes amid the bustle of everyday life. It's right here, right now, amid the distractions that we have to negotiate, amid the unfinished tasks that always press, that we feel the need to complete. It's in the details of everyday life that invitation comes for us to look more deeply and to begin to consider the underlying order of this world and of our lives. Now, what she promises, what God promises through the order by which he created this world, is that if we will pay attention, if we will give over our awareness to him and his way of ordering things, that will set us on a path, a journey that will result in insight. That's the promise, that it will initiate a way of life that will result in eyes that see, ears that hear, where we will come to as we look at the world, amid all of the cacophony of different things going on, among all the varieties of things and experiences, we'll see through that this kind of order pop out that's life-giving if we live in keeping with it. And so the eyes to see deeply are what we're offered by wisdom. And she says it this way. She says, if you will turn to my correction, if you will listen to me, I will pour out my spirit on you, and I'll make my words known to you. In other words, meaning in life, those moments where it finally clicks, we get what's really going on, we see the world clearly, those moments are gifts. Okay? They're not something that we really achieve, but on the other hand, they only come when we put ourselves in a position to receive them. And so it requires listening, it requires paying attention. But if we will do that, the promise is that we will be gifted with these moments where a connection is made between what we're seeing and the underlying order by which God made the world and by which human life can be guided into flourishing and into well-being. And so if we put ourselves in a position, then that connection between the utterances and their meaning will come together, between what we see and the deep significance of them will come together, and we'll receive that as a gift. But not everybody will put themselves in a position to receive that insight, to gain meaning. And because of that, what we're given first here is a picture of what happens if we reject God's invitation to wisdom. And through showing us what it looks like when somebody rejects her call, refuses to look deeply at things, and instead chooses to live on the surface, pursuing, remember, false goals, money, sex for their own sake, and using mistaken means, violence and deceit, right? That's what happens when we live on the surface. Wisdom here tells us, here's what happens if you refuse my call to come further up and deeper in, to learn about the deep structure of things. This is what will happen. Verse 24. She says, because I called, but you refused. I stretched out my hand and you paid no attention. You neglected all my counsel. You did not want my correction. And so I will even laugh at your calamity. I'll mock when your dread comes. When your dread comes like a storm and your calamity comes on like a whirlwind, when distress and anguish come on you, then you'll call on me, but I won't answer. They'll seek me diligently at that point, but they will not find me, because they hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of the Lord. They would not accept my counsel. They spurned all my reproof. The first thing that we see here is that there's a reality check about those conditions under which we can acquire wisdom. And if we don't live according to this deeper order, if we pursue shallowness, then that will lead to calamity. At that point of calamity, everybody wants to have a deeper life. Everybody wants wisdom in order to be able to live well. But the problem is that wisdom cannot be attained that way. And so the first thing that we see, there's kind of two reality checks here. The first one is verse 28 through 30. And summarize it this way. Wisdom cannot be obtained or acquired simply on the spot. It cannot be attained at the moment it's critically needed in a crisis. It has to be acquired before the crisis comes. This is true of skills in general, and wisdom, you remember, is life skill. I cannot, at that crucial moment in the game, when everything hangs on my ability to make a free throw, I cannot at that moment suddenly trade my nervous system that has been shaped to playing video games and eating potato chips. I can't trade that nervous system out for a nervous system that was shaped by years and years of free throws when everybody else is sitting on the couch playing games. Can't do it. I can't trade it out at that point. I'm going to have to play the game with the nervous system, with the habits, dispositions, skills, or lack thereof that I have at that moment. It cannot be acquired on the spot. Likewise, I cannot, before the big test, before the big exam, the night before, acquire knowledge of calculus. It's too late. That's a process that I have to go through long before. When it comes time for the test, I'm either ready or I'm not, and that will have been decided by what I did over a long period of time leading up to that. It is generally true of life that the skills that we need have to be acquired before the crisis in which they make all the difference. I cannot acquire skills on game day that are needed to win. I cannot acquire on the spot the wisdom that's needed when the calamity, when the crisis comes. I have to do it before that moment of crisis. So that's the first reality that we learn here about wisdom, and it's a condition for us of acquiring it. We must start now, because when the moment comes when it's so vital, we can't pick it up on the spot. The second truth, verse 31 through 33. And so in the midst of this calamity, it says, they will eat the fruit of their own way, their own path, and they'll be satiated with their own devices, because the waywardness of the simple shall kill them, and the complacency of fools shall destroy them. In other words, it's those habits and dispositions, those skills or lack thereof, that will bring the result in their life. But he who listens to me shall live securely and shall be at ease from the dread of evil. The second truth that we need to know about wisdom and its acquisition is simply this: it is impossible to uncouple or detach destinations from the path that leads to them. In this life, you and I are given the freedom by God to choose what path we will follow. But we cannot choose to have a destination that is different from the path that we choose to walk down. They're inseparable. And let me just say that what this means in everyday life is ultimately nobody gets away with anything. Nobody gets away with anything. Not long-term, not ultimately. And grace is not an exception to this. What grace means is that God is ever ready in his goodness to enable us to switch paths. Okay? You can step out of a path leading to destruction into a path leading to life, and God is always ready to receive you and empower you to switch paths. Okay? And so as long as we have life and breath, as long as we're able to hear this call and think about it, it's still possible by God's grace to switch paths and to get on the path leading to life. Okay? But what grace does not do is say, walk down this path and you'll end up at a different destination. That's not how grace works. And so God has put this world together in such a way that nobody ever gets away with anything. Ultimately, we will receive the fruit, we will eat the fruit of the life that we've lived. Now, we live in a world that is, I don't think it's too much to say, obsessed with trying to find a way to uncouple root from fruit, path from destination. And we have words for this. One of the words that is currently most in favor is hacking. Okay? We're offered 1,000 hacks every day, and they come in memes and by emails. And we're obsessed with this idea that somehow there must be a way to get a quick fix, to bypass the path that leads naturally to a destination and to simply reap instantly the fruit, to instantly obtain a destination without walking down the path that would lead to it naturally. The book of Proverbs, Scripture, also has a word for this approach to life. It's folly, foolishness. God in his goodness has fashioned this world and has ordered human life such that reality is unhackable as a whole, ultimately. We may be able short term to circumvent and to get a quick response, but there's so many redundancies, so many built-in corrections and checks and balances in this world as a whole, in nature, both human and external to us nature, that ultimately reality is unhackable. The only sure way to reach the destination that we long for is to set our feet on the path that leads to that destination. And it's God in his goodness, in his wisdom, that set things this way so that we could go about the slow but life-giving process of establishing the roots that naturally lead to the fruit that we long for. So let's go back then. Let's go back to where this began in chapter 1 and verse 20. Right here, right now, wisdom shouts out in the street. She's crying out to you and to me. God in his goodness is reminding me, and he's reminding you, that right here, right now, is the time to start down the path of wisdom, of life skill, of virtue.